PPIRS or PPIRS. It makes me think of the, PPIRS. So,
Hey everybody, I'm Scott, and I've been working with ASI Education from the beginning, making these videos. I'm usually the man behind the camera and the person that does all of the editing. And I have been blown away by the amazing amount of knowledge that we have within the people at ASI Education. I am not one of them. I started a year ago, and before that, I did not know anything about government acquisition. And so over the last year, I've learned quite a bit, but there's still a lot for me to learn. And so we decided, me and Will, to sit down and have him answer some of my dumb questions. If this is something that is valuable to you, we would love for you to comment below, maybe even ask some of your own dumb questions. There really aren't any dumb questions. In this series, I've asked a bunch of dumb questions that led to some amazing conversations and some awesome insights into how government acquisition works and how the rules work and some of the nuances of all that goes into government acquisition. So we hope you enjoy this video. You use a lot of acronyms. So I went to this government contracting site to look up what acronym should I learn? They had 123,000 acronyms listed.
wow.
On this website.
Yes.
And so I was just I'm lost. So I'm going to ask you, there's a couple that I had questions on. We did the sole source video.
Yeah.
A couple months ago. There was one part where you were painting J and A. What's J and A?
J&A is Justification and Approval.
Okay.
So it's the document you have to write if you're in Part 6 of the FAR, is a part that's executing a statutory act called CICA. I'm gonna throw in a bonus acronym at you. I'm answering your acronym questions with acronyms.
Don't make it worse.
So CICA is Competition in Contracting Act. Okay. I forgot where it came out, 1984. I'm sure that's not right, but let's just say 84. Okay. And then the editor can tell us how dumb we are, which is you.
Yeah. Okay.
So CICA, it goes back to that idea that you can't just go to one contractor. So Competition and Contracting Act, just in a nutshell, you need to go full and open. You need to give every company the opportunity to compete. Okay. And that's actually really good because, you were talking about starting a video production company, and competing with the government. If they already had a company they've been using since the 1970s that's just been great, and you're out of luck. But what CICA is supposed to do is allow companies like yours, where you may have just started, the opportunity to provide something good for the government. And we won't go into all the benefits of CICA because there's innovation, lower prices, there's all this stuff that competition benefits the government. But so full and open competition. There are exceptions to going full and open. And that's where you can go to one company or sole source. Sole is one, source is just the company, and they call that a sole source contract. So they call that exception to full and open other than full and open. Okay. Super creative government terminology. So other than full and open, I think there's seven types of, or 7 reasons that you can go just to one source. Okay. The most common one by far.
And you know all of them?
I can try to name them. And then
all right, I'll put you on the spot.
You can fact check me when you're editing.
All right.
Or I'll fact check myself when I'm editing. So the most common one by far is only one responsible company can do this. Only one company is able to do this. And that was the basis of our music video we did.
There's not at least 2 responsible people who can do the things that you do.
So if there is only one company, and Part 6 tells you that you have to create this document to justify that.
Okay.
You got to justify it in the justification. And then one of the ways you justify it is you show that there's not at least 2 responsible companies that can do that thing you need. Because if there were at least 2, well, then you'd have competition. Then if you go full and open competition, you'd at least get 2.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, one question is, well, why don't you just, if you know there's only one company and no other company can do it, why don't you just do full and open competition anyway? And you know you're only going to get one back. And you don't have to write this J&A. The reason why is because it takes so long to do a competition. Well, a lot of time. I mean, you can do competitions fast, but in a lot of cases, it takes a lot longer to do that than to just write the J&A document and say, no, we're not even going to run through the works of doing a competition. Let's just do the J&A and do the sole source. So that's one. Other examples, oh man, I'm not going to, I had to memorize this for my warrant exam, but there's one of my favorites, which is not common at all. I think it's one stuck at the very end, is industrial mobilization, which means that you have some kind of need to get industry and together to mobilize to create something. And I mean, and the biggest example of industrial mobilization, we did a book review on this, Freedom's Forge during World War II, right? There wasn't a lot of, during wartime, not a lot of competition going on. You have a mission to do.
Yeah, we're in a hurry. We need to get it done. Okay.
And just to seal the deal on whether or not there needs to be any writing to say that, Part 6 will say, yeah, there's an exception. I don't even know if you have to write a J&A. We have to look at the Part 6 for that. There is urgent and compelling reasons, and that is there's a whole articles written on what urgent and compelling really means. Because some people will say urgent and compelling, it's not so urgent. You know, it's like when you're with your kids and they go to the bathroom and think it's urgent, it's an emergency, and it's not really an emergency. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, we can act that way about our requirements. So interesting thing about urgent and compelling and some of these others is that's a situation where there are other companies that could do it. And you're saying, no, I got to go with this because it's urgent. So like I need sneakers. I don't know why that would ever be, you know, a government requirement. I need sneakers. And instead of going with New Balance, Reebok, Adidas, I'm just going to go to Nike because it's really urgent that I have to have sneakers now, and Nike's right next to me. So that's kind of So let's look at some others. I'm interested. This won't take long.
Cool.
This is the FAR we use in all our videos. If anyone's interested,
it might be out of date.
It's the 2011 FAR that I used when I first started. That's why it's all tabbed and everything because I think I've read it. Okay. International agreements. Never ever found myself using that exception, but it's there. This is a big one. This is probably the second most common one after the only one responsible source. It's authorized or required by statute. So let's talk authorized and let's talk required first. And this goes back to the point I'd made where when the government is engaging in contracts with a company, they kind of push in. It's almost like sneaking vegetables in your kids' food. They sneak in some of their own policies. Like, well, if we're going to make a contract, let's go ahead and fulfill some public policy objectives. So authorized or required by statute. An example of a sole source situation authorized by statute is 8A, an 8A company. An 8A, you are allowed to go sole source to an 8A, Section 8A. It's like it's not exactly the same, I think, as the rules have changed a little bit, but a socially disadvantaged business, SDB, and like an American Indian organization, Alaskan Native, for example, ANC. That's another sole source situation that is authorized by statute just to go to them. And again, it's not urgent and compelling. It's not that they're the only responsible one, but it's fulfilling another kind of agenda that the government has. We want to help Alaskan Native organizations. We want to help their companies just kind of get it up in our economy and help their businesses out. Required by statute. So I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but there are some companies that you have to use depending on the supplier service. A lot of the stuff that we train on, talk about, like artificial intelligence, doesn't apply. We're usually talking about like furniture, landscaping, custodial. Part 8 talks about required sources of supply. And each of those sources in there meet very specific public policy objectives. So one is called Ability One. And Ability One, I love this, this one actually. So Ability One is a program that helps severely disabled and blind Americans or companies that are owned by severely disabled or blind get jobs. So if a service is on the Ability One list, you cannot go out to the public market. You cannot go out to another company. You've got to go with an Ability One company.
You have to sole.
It's required.
Okay.
It's Ability One. So examples of Ability One services that are common are groundskeeping, custodial. So if you see in a lot of government offices, you go in, you'll see Ability One workers. And these are people who usually the employees themselves will have some kind of disability, whether it's a physical or mental disability.
Ability One is a company?
Ability One is kind of a company. It's an organization. It's like a nonprofit that kind of organizes handles and the contracts they're written in a regular government contract, but they're handled a little differently. Okay. Since it's sole source, it's priced a little bit differently. You can still negotiate, but it's hard to negotiate Ability One. Okay. So that's an example of something required by statute. Another is UNICOR, and UNICOR is for the federal prison industries. And that's a rehabilitation program for prisoners to make furniture in prison, and the federal government buys it from FBI. I say furniture because that's the main example I can think of. I can't think of anything else UNICOR. But if you're looking for a desk, that's why you never seen government offices, like the big Godfather-style mahogany oak desk or whatever. Maybe you do. I've never. Maybe in the higher levels. Yeah. It's because you're required to go with another source, UNICOR. It's a lot of times it's best value and stuff like that.
So all across the nation, they all have the same desks?
No, I mean it'll be different companies, I think, and sometimes you'll find you have to look and see if they're available. So I had to. I worked for a defense agency where we supplied schools. So I did this a lot. I would go to the UNICOR website. I'd see if they had it, and if they didn't, I would go down the list, and then there was other sources I had to look at first. But a lot of times they won't, and you go to another supply. But so. And it's best value. So when people, they're making fun of government offices and saying, look how shoddy those look. Man, Silicon Valley, they're way sharper. Well, sometimes the reason they look like that is because they're fulfilling public policy objectives that are a little bit more noble than maybe the company out in Silicon Valley who spent a lot of money on their office. So.
Okay, cool, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
Was I explaining the acronym? That was a long explanation.
That is.
Anyway, the approval part.
This was supposed to be the speed round where we cover a bunch of stuff. But I think that's a whole video all by itself.
Yeah, I'll be a little more concise.
Yeah, that's
There's just so much to say with these. Yeah.
Well, I think the next one we might get into it also. So.
All right.
This week we filmed a Johnny Cash cover.
Ah, yes.
About an RFI.
The RFI.
All my time on requests for information, and all it brought me was nothing but frustration.
I got burned by the RFI, that RFI.
I'm confused about exactly what an RFI and what was the other, RFP?
Yeah.
So
RFQ? Is it RFQ? Have you heard the
RFQ
RFQ one?
RFQ. Are there any more RF anythings?
There's an IFB.
Okay.
Kind of in the same category.
All right.
IFB.
So what are kind of that? What is that?
I have no idea.
Oh, you don't know?
No, I'm just kidding. I do.
Okay.
I do. Yeah.
So, you're bringing up stuff you don't know.
We just sang about it. It just sounded cool.
Okay. Yeah.
It's RFI sounds like Ring of Fire.
It does. That's it.
No, RFI is a request for information. So this is kind of like the call and response dance between the government and companies.
Okay.
The government will send something out, industry will bite, send something back. So it's this call and response dance. There's kind of two phases to that. One is maybe you call it the pre-acquisition phase. That's before anything gets sent out officially, like come one, come all, submit your bids.
Okay.
It's the phase of market research. It's the phase that the government should probably spend a lot more time in. But that's where they're getting the thumb on the pulse of the market, trying to figure out what's out there to help them define their requirement. And that is part 10 in the FAR, talks about market research. Okay. If you want to feel good about just that you've read one part of the FAR, then read part 10. Anybody? You? Yeah? If you want to read a part, read part 10. It's like 2 pages.
All right, I'll read part 10 and say
part 10.
I got one part.
RFI's in there, I think. So
all right, that sounds good.
I don't know if they explain it very well, but I'll explain it better.
It'll probably confuse me more. Yeah, so you just tell me.
So an RFI is in that realm of market research. So you can say, if you're trying to find out, let's like you and I are trying to, okay, I'm going to give a really bad, like a really non-governmental example.
Okay.
We want to play some volleyball and we need a net. And since you're so tall, we need a net that's bigger than regulation size, but all the ones that we find are like the regular size. And you're like, this is boring for me. Like, let's up our game. Let's get a huge net for the giant that I am, right? Okay. So we don't know if that exists out there. Like, we can't just go on the catalog. Amazon doesn't have that. So we send out a request for information to a government point of entry, probably is the most common one. So the government point of entry is the bulletin board for government. And it used to be a bulletin board, like you put a bulletin board, and then it actually used to be in a catalog, like in newspapers. That was the, sam.gov?
Yeah.
Sam.gov is basically the publication. It's like the come one, come all. Okay. And since we have the internet, we don't have to go out on newspapers anymore as the government. I'm saying we, I mean government. So, so you put that on the catalog and say, hey, we're looking for a high net. Does anybody do a net that high? That's a request for information. And you specify what you want your answers to look like. And then all these companies come back and you get the responses, and then that's part of your market. It's a really effective way to do market research. Okay. Then you got all these companies telling you, yeah, we can do that, but it's going to cost this, or yeah, we can. And the quality of the answers you get back is probably going to be in proportion to the quality of the RFI that you write. So you're going to have to be, a little bit tailored in how you want your answers to come in. Like, I'm looking for something that can do this. Please explain how it can do that. I'm curious. I just want to know, And so if you write a really bad RFI, like really vague, then you're going to get answers all over the place. It's going to be hard to read. If you write a too restrictive RFI, then you're just going to get a bunch of yes answers. Like, yeah, I can do all those things. It's like, all right, well. Yep. So there's a skill to writing good RFIs. And the point of our song that we just made is you don't want to send an RFI out and just to check a box and then not read it. Because a lot of these companies will spend especially if you say RFI is due the day after Christmas Eve at midnight, or some crazy, has to be no less than 20 pages, but no more than 21. Has to be font, and then so these companies, and it's like anything that doesn't meet this, we're not going to read, which is really crazy because it's just market research. But we do that. The government can do that sometimes. So you spin around creating this RFI, and then they don't even read them. But they're just checking a box because one of the requirements in writing a J&A that you have to say that you did is that a lot of local policy says that you need to have submitted an RFI first, saying, can anyone do this? And if you don't get any responses back, or if you get responses back that aren't responsible, or that they can't, that shows that they really can't do it, then you can say, well, look, I combed the market. Yeah. So anyway, that's an RFI. Right. An RFP and an RFQ, that's where you're getting actually into the solicitation phase, the formal phase. The difference between an RFP and an RFQ, so an RFP is a request for proposals. Okay. So request for information, you're just asking for info. I'm trying to get market research. Request for proposals, you're like, no, I actually want your offer. Okay. And what a request for proposal is exactly that. So to get into the legality of the contract process here, a contract needs offer, acceptance, consideration to be a legally binding agreement.
Offer, acceptance, consideration. In that order?
Offer, acceptance, and consideration. Yeah, it kind of happens all, the offer happens first. Okay. Acceptance happens after that. And there has to be some kind of consideration involved, like a tit for tat. Okay. Yeah, otherwise it's like a one-sided deal. Yeah. Right. So, so the solicitation is not an offer. The government never offers something, and then a company looks at it and is like, oh, I accept, The government's always soliciting for a company to offer, and the government will be like, and they're like, I accepted this one. So the offer always has to come from the company. The government never offers.
Geniuses.
Yeah.
never be the first one to put it out there.
Right. And there is a slight exception to that, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that's usually the case. So that's an RFP. It's basically saying, another way to say RFP is request for offers. Okay. And a competition basically is you're getting a bunch of offers that come in.
And that also includes like what it would cost, like it has the money and
it's got the money in there. It's got whatever you put in your solicitation that you need back.
Okay.
But yeah, the FAR and other regulations, you have to put that in your solicitation. Like, give me your prices.
Okay.
Give me your work statement. So the proposals that are written in an RFP, in response to an RFP, will be an offer that really highlights everything. So the government, all they need to do really is unilaterally say, I accept. Technically, they don't even need a signature from the contractor. They're like, yep, I accept. Usually at a good practice, we do a bilateral thing. Like the government will sign, contractor will sign. Technically for an RFP, you don't need that. They've already offered. Yeah. All you have to do is accept. There's consideration in the contract. Boom, you got a legally binding. That's an RFP.
Okay.
RFQ is different. An RFQ is for simplified acquisition. And that's in part 13. Simplified is if it goes under a threshold called the SAT. Here's another acronym.
SAT?
Yeah, I think they call it the SAT, though, SAT.
SAT, okay.
You don't say SAT because it makes you think of the test.
The test, yeah.
So SAT. Simplified acquisition threshold.
Okay.
When I started, it was 150. I think it's more. We can fact check that. Maybe it's 250 or something. Still pretty low. If you're under, and there's
$250,000, $250. Okay.
Which is pretty low for today's standards in government contracting. There are exceptions that bump that up to the SAT up to a higher level. If you're under the SAT, your requirement, you can do a lot of simple stuff, and you can send out an RFQ. And an RFQ doesn't have to follow, just as a side, Part 6, the CICA part. You don't do full and open competition. You still want to promote competition to the maximum extent practicable. That's different than being required to do full and open. So anyway, so Part 13, you send out an RFQ. RFQ, though, is you're just asking for a quote. That's not a proposal. It's a quote, and a quote is not an offer. So when you send an RFQ out, you're still getting a whole bunch of bids kind of in, but they're quotes. So when the government accepts, it's the government that's actually submitting the offer, and then you have to get a bilateral signature that way, right? So with an RFP, you can just do unilateral signature. Unilateral meaning the government signs it and then boom, it's binding.
It's done. Okay.
With an RFQ, if you like a quote, the government gives them the contract. It's going to be the full contract with a government signature, but that contract, until that company signs it, it's just an offer. Once that company signs that, and it's usually called with an RFQ like a purchase order, a PO. Okay. I'm throwing acronyms.
I know POs. That's regular world.
Yeah, okay. Government has them too.
Okay. Nice.
POs. And contractor has to sign those, then they become binding. I found that out the hard way. I was starting off, and I was buying a whole bunch of school supplies, and I couldn't find it for some reason on these other lists. Usually you can order those from a schedule or a catalog. Yeah. I couldn't find, these are very special supplies I couldn't find. So I found this service-disabled, veteran-owned small business, SDVOSB. There's another acronym. These guys gave me their quote. I liked it, and I gave them the contract, and I signed it, and I thought that we were good to go, and they thought they were good to go too. And so, but they never delivered. Like they never sent me the stuff. They just completely failed on performance. And so I started like saying, I'm going to have to terminate this contract. We got to figure this out. And then I looked into it. They never actually signed the purchase order. So technically, we never had a contract to begin with.
Oh, wow.
And so it was good for me, though, because I didn't have to do a termination. I just said, you know what? This was actually never a contract. No one performed. They didn't accept my offer. Can move on. I didn't have to go through the termination process.
Okay. Is the termination process difficult?
Yeah, it is. It can be. And I don't know what the
awkward.
If you terminate, yeah, and I don't think for this particular process it wouldn't have been bad at all because they knew they weren't going to get paid.
Okay.
You know, and there probably could have been a very simple way of just making sure that contract was taken care of, and then everyone goes on their way. So that's the RFQ. I'll be quick on IFB. That's another solicitation. It's called Invitation for Bid, and that's Part 14. It's called sealed bidding. Yeah, so sealed bidding used to be done a lot more frequently in the government, and it's almost like the way construction contracts are done today. I think even in the private world with primes and subs, you put your specifications down. and the bids come in a sealed envelope, and your specifications are so precise that then there's not going to be a lot of variation in everybody's approach to meeting your need. That you can just, that all of those envelopes will probably have exactly what you want, and it's all going to come down to something like price. And then what they did was they had a bid opening where, like at a gym or something or some public place, everybody would come and a government official would open each of those envelopes, read them, and then they'd pick the person on the spot. And that's sealed bids. It's in part 14. That starts with an invitation for bid. Again, I've never done it because we've moved into services where there's so much variation. There's nothing I can think of that I contracted for as a government professional where a sealed bid would have not gotten me in trouble. Like I knew, or my customer knew, my requirement guy knew exactly what to write to where we knew what was in those envelopes, had no variation, that we'd be good to go just opening it and saying, you win. Usually we'd have to do some kind of trade-off where it's like, well, this company can do this, that's cool. That company can do that, that's a weakness. That's usually the way contracts are done now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Long answer.
All right, the last one on my speed round, that's 20 minutes long now. We were doing, and you just brought up a termination. We're doing a Godfather video where people are being terminated. And we said something about CPARS, CPA.
Yeah, CPARS.
CPARS. All right. What is CPARS? Why did the characters in our video why was that such a big deal to them? Yeah,
so in the video we talked about when your contractors fail you, right? They're not performing well, and you gotta take care of it. So you gotta take care of it. The very last scene, we get into the terminations. That's like the last resort for underperforming contractors. So we talked about in the video where, and who knows if the video's out yet, so there's a little sneak peek.
Spoiler alert.
We talked about, first and foremost, if there's an underperformer, it's sometimes, maybe half the time, hopefully not more than half the time, I don't know, it's the government's fault.
Oh, okay.
And that kind of falls under the umbrella of a clause we put in the contract that talks about excusable delays. So delay, underperformance, whatever is excusable because, hey, the government messed up. Or the government delay, I can't do this because I'm still waiting on the security guy or whatever. When it's not under that big category, then it's the contractor's fault. And one of the ways you can do that is through disincentives, negative disincentives. And one of the biggest negative disincentives, other than just like not paying an invoice or paying less than what they owe, like, deducting the invoice, which we talked about that too in the video, is giving them a negative evaluation. So you got to do that anyway. So CPARS is contractor performance assessment reporting system. And it's the system, the contracting officer's representative. He's the guy or gal who monitors monitors the performance of the contract. The core.
I learned about that in Murder Mystery.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to throw some other acronyms at you. So the core engages in QA. That's quality assurance.
Okay.
And they use the plan they put in to the contract they keep themselves called the Quality Assurance Surveillance Plan, or the QASP, which was one of our letters in My First FAR in the video.
I still don't know what a QASP is. So
there it is. That's the plan.
It's the coolest. I think it's the coolest acronym. QASP sounds like a cool wasp.
QASP. Yeah, it does.
As a kid, I probably it's like a Transformer character I would have liked. QASP.
Yeah. It's way less cool in reality than it sounds.
So what is it? It's a quality...
It's a quality assurance surveillance plan.
Okay.
It's basically the plan on how the core is going to monitor performance.
Okay.
So you got this yin-yang of quality of the quality of the contract. The government does quality assurance.
Okay.
The contractor does quality control, QC.
Okay.
And they create something called the Quality Control Plan, or QCP. So their quality control is preventative. Okay. Quality assurance is more reactive, like it's making sure things are done. Quality control on the contractor is making sure things are going to be done or are being done right.
Okay,
right?
Yeah.
All right. So the other responsibility, one of the responsibilities of the core is to write the contractor performance assessment report. So that's the like report card of how well that contractor performed. And they do that like periodically throughout the contract performance period. They just write this report. You got to write a narrative. So, and they have these little ratings, unsatisfactory to exceptional, I think is the very top one. It's like a five-point scale there. So the scary thing about this though, for negative reports, with low scores, is that report actually gets pumped into another system called the Past Performance Information Retrieval System, PPIRS or PPIRS, which is way less cool than the QASP. So,
that sounds pretty cool to me.
Yeah, it makes me think of the, PPIRS. So, and it actually makes me think of because what it's doing is it's allowing the government to look at past performance. They retrieve that. So it is almost like they're peeping, peepers. They're getting their peepers on past performance of the contract.
Okay.
So let's say you do a contract with Health and Human Services, and you do a terrible job. No one likes you on the site. They just can't wait. Like, how long do we have Scott for? Like 2 more months? Okay, great. Yeah. And so the Corps, who you also don't get along with, writes a terrible review for you in CPARS for the HHS. That's going to go into past performance. And then for future source selections, so a source selection is when you do compete. Okay. And part of the competition, when you get the proposal in, you're not just looking at proposals from these different offers. You can also choose, and you actually have to do this in Part 15 and other parts, unless you do an exception to it. You need to do a past performance evaluation as well. So you do evaluation of the proposal, right? Like, does this proposal say, is this a good proposal? But you're also going beyond the proposal itself, looking at that company and doing a whole past performance review of that company.
So you're like reading their Amazon reviews. Yeah,
you can. Well, I mean, a lot of times in your solicitation, you'll require the companies to submit their own past performance information, and which they'll do. Okay. So for a lot, and past performance evaluations include a lot of different sources of of information for you to look at. Okay. So a big bulk of that is the contractor submitted, and it's kind of like, look what we did. And then they write past performance stuff. Okay. But then another layer of it is to go to PPIRS and pull up CPARS. And so if you try to do a contract in the future with, let's say, DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, they can pull that HHS. It doesn't have to. It's not the same agency looking at the same agency stuff. It's government-wide. So your bad contract with HHS could actually be really bad for future contracts with any government agency at all. Okay. So you want to make sure your CPARS is good. Now, a lot of new contracts like OTs, other transactions that aren't FAR-based, they won't use CPARS. But a lot of FAR-based contracts still will. And negative CPARS, speaking from experience, from that side of things, I think I just hit my microphone. That's okay. From that side of things, I'll tell you that a negative CPARS absolutely impacts your chances of getting the contract.
What about new companies that don't have a CPARS yet?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, there's really good past performance rating. Okay. There's really negative past performance rating. If you have no past performance at all, there's something that agencies will stick in their contracts that says that companies will not be, if you do not have any past performance, companies will not be viewed favorably or unfavorably. Okay. So it's called you just get a neutral rating. And neutral ratings, especially when you have a lot of companies involved, are some of the most challenging ratings to evaluate. Because what if you have 2 companies and then one is exceptional? They're technically, like their proposal, they're awesome. And they're offering you something that's going to be awesome. The second company, same thing. Awesome. So they get really good technical. Both are technical, exceptional. Really no way to distinguish. All right. So let's go
peeping.
Yeah. So it goes down to past performance. Maybe there's some differentiation in past performance because the technical is the same. Let's say one of the companies has exceptional past performance, high confidence rating. With past performance rating, the rating is called the confidence rating.
Okay.
Because based on their past performance, you have a high confidence that they'll do the job. The whole reason why you do past performance. It's to increase your confidence.
Yeah.
So let's say they've got an exceptional confidence rating, but the other company, no past performance. So they've got a neutral rating. How do you find out what's better, right? So it's hard to, you obviously, I mean, a lot of people will want to go with the high confidence exceptional rating, but that would be treating that company unfavorably for their neutral rating. You can't do that. So, you know, unless there's some price variation, it's a very challenging thing for a lot of agencies to rate neutral rated companies. And what usually, unfortunately, ends up happening is they either they end up rating them favorably or unfavorably based on that neutral rating. It's a good question, though, because that's a tricky topic. You cracked into a tricky topic. It's
probably hard to get out of that neutral zone.
Yeah. We have a joke Christmas article about that where the 12 Days of Christmas.
Okay.
And Santa didn't get the contract for the Christmas. And some guy came in, Mitch Gibson, who's a Florida man, who won the Christmas contract based on a neutral past performance rating. And so it talks about him, like he hands out tribal tattoos to all the kids in their stockings now. Anyway.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, what are we doing?
We're like, well, that's it, folks. Hope you enjoyed this informal talk. If you know, and we can do a couple of those.
We'll do this part formal.
I guess. I don't know. Well, just to have more, because if we're going to do like 2 or 3 of these,
okay, yeah.
We want to have like multiple closers, right?
Yeah.
Or if you want to use the same closer each time.
All right, yeah, we can do a couple of them.
All right. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks. So things go bad when you try to get formal.
It's so hard. It's so funny because we've been formal all week.
Yeah.
Like scripted and doing it, and then now we're out of script, and now I can't even think about how to talk scriptedly to the camera.
That's how Bebop was born, you know, in the jazz.
Really?
They do swing jazz all day or all night, you know, and then around 1 a.m. to like 4 a.m., the jazz musicians who did this very scripted swing music would go backstage and just let loose on, and that bebop is just incredibly abstract, just kind of doing their own thing. So that was their, as our artists, way of just letting loose and just you know, hanging out and just doing their own thing.
So we did our bebop, and now we got to go back to some swing.
We got to go back. We're going to bebop to swing again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we can just, you know. Why don't you talk? Oh, yeah, I don't know. Do we need the transitions? Why don't we just fade out and we can just have like text or something?
Yeah.
Join us next time. Text.